The critical issues facing Italian football have been known for years. These are systemic deficiencies. Why is nothing being done to reverse the negative trend? 6 days after being forced to resign, former Italian Federation President Gabriele Gravina posed this question. It was part of a 4,000-word final punch he threw to Serie A and the Italian government, where he proceeded to list everything wrong with Italian football. Everything from youth systems to low-quality domestic football to old infrastructure to the Italian government to overall complacency. And honestly, while the sentiment of this entire publication is very clearly self-serving, which we will get into, the raw numbers are quite damning. 1.9%. That was the percentage of total minutes played in Serie A by under 21 players eligible for the Italian national team in all of 2025. It sounds low. It is low. In fact, according to CIES Football Observatory, amongst the 50 top divisions that were examined, Italy were second to last in terms of development of young players. From a senior perspective, of the 534 registered Serie A players, 366, or about 69% of them, are foreign. This clearly leaves Italy in a very precarious position. However, latching onto numbers without context can often be misleading. England, for example, sit only slightly above Italy in terms of minutes for domestic youth in the Premier League with 2.4%. They're second to last in terms of top 5. Plus, they have an even higher concentration of foreigners, with over 72% of players in the league coming from abroad. In fact, no English manager has ever even won the Premier League. Yet the narrative around the Three Lions is that they have improved rapidly over the last decade by completely overhauling their development pipelines, learning from their international competition, and harnessing the power of friendship. Then again, like I said, context is important and narratives are fleeting. It was only a few years ago that Italy defeated England in the 2020 Euros final, and many declared that Italian football was saved. Evidently, that was not the case. Italian football is in a real mess. And the institutions are not helping the situation. The Football Federation, the leagues, even the Italian government are at each other's throats, and it could cost them more than just World Cup spots. The 2032 Euros was awarded to both Turkey and Italy in a joint bid. The hosts were made official in late 2023. A great honor for both nations. However, while Turkey have undertaken a multi-decade journey to improve their football infrastructure, building roughly 30 new stadiums countrywide since 2007, Italy has not been so proactive. The Italians have produced 6 in that time frame. Quote, Italian politicians should ask themselves why Italy has one of the worst football infrastructures in Europe. Euro 2032 is planned, and I hope Italy will be ready. Otherwise, it will not be played in Italy. UEFA President Alexander Ceferin said this in April of 2026, with the knowledge that only one Italian stadium has been deemed to meet the standards required by UEFA to be a host, Juventus's Allianz Stadium. The Italian Federation have until October 2026 to submit at least 4 more. And you would think that at the very least, this would be achievable through renovations of several stadiums that already host multiple Champions League games and more every year. But given that many Italian clubs do not own their stadiums and municipal bureaucracy often kills attempts at changing that, it makes you wonder how achievable this really is. Of course, they cannot build and renovate stadiums like the rest of the top leagues when there is simply not as much money flowing through the system. As per the latest UEFA benchmarking reports, Serie A remains in 4th place, just above France in terms of league-wide revenue, which should not be surprising. Domestically, France has never been as large as the other big 5 in terms of on- and off-field success. The French side has only won the UEFA Champions League once since 1993, and that team is so far ahead of everyone else that the league moves their fixtures for them so they can rest up before UCL games and help boost the country's UEFA coefficient. Not much has changed for France domestically, and they have their own financial issues. But that same point also serves to highlight how poor Italy's infrastructure truly is. French football as a whole is the strongest it has ever been. They are the gold standard regarding youth coaching and talent production. evidenced by the fact that French players are regularly amongst the top performers of every league across Europe. Their national side is the most successful European team in the 21st century in terms of finals appearances, 3 World Cup finals and 2 Euros finals since the turn of the century, 3 of which came in the last 10 years. And looking at this table, the fact that Italy are so close to them in these criteria, yet are so far in reality, speaks to the level of the fall-off. Now, I bring up France and England to show that they have their own shortcomings. Flaws can be identified in every large footballing nation, as a matter of fact. Italy's problem seems to be that they exhibit all of these combined problems all at the same time. I mean, there's also the issue of the mafia having infiltrated several facets of the league. It's not ideal. But even that, it's not even intrinsically Italian at this point. The good news is that not all hope is lost. Investment is coming into the local leagues. The country is obviously football mad. The Italians consistently do well in youth competitions. Winners of the Under-17 European Championship in 2024, the Under-19 Euros in 2023, runners-up in the 2023 Under-20 World Cup. The talent is clearly there. The question is whether the infrastructure as a whole catches up before another generation is lost. Hello everyone, welcome back. Would you believe that was the intro? In today's episode, we discuss the state of Italian football at all levels. Let's go back to Gravina's final blow for a second. As I said, there doesn't appear to be very much introspection going on. He brings up the issues with the youth pipeline, speaking about how only 4 Italian clubs are among the top 50 most profitable youth academies between 2014 and 2023 by transfer revenue. He presents some statistics on how much slower Italian football is than the rest of the continent, measured by sprints and average ball speed. He blames the Italian government for not funding stadium projects. He blames the EU for not allowing them to implement minimum quotas for Italian players in the leagues, which would be illegal. He blames Serie A for blocking proposals for structural reform of the league, claiming he submitted 17 drafts of a proposal that would, among other things, decrease the number of teams in the league, which would mean that teams get more from shared revenue, but would also mean that smaller teams may never have a chance to play in the top division. But on the whole, he came here with a lot of receipts, and who knows, his proposals may very well have been ingenious had they went through. But his framing here conveniently omits that he was the president for 8 years. He did inherit a lot of these problems, but he was also there for long enough to own many of them. He appointed the coaches, or at the very least his staff in the FA appointed them, yet the report barely mentions managerial decisions or issues with overall governance. He claims credit for youth tournament success, bringing up the Under-20, Under-17 and Under-19 triumphs, then in the same breath shifts responsibility for the senior team's collapse. It's missing what many would refer to as accountability. He is right about one thing though. The issues, they have been known for a long time. By 2030, there will be 24-year-olds that were conceived as a result of their country's success, but will never have witnessed their country play a World Cup knockout match. There will be 16-year-old Italians that may not even know what a World Cup is. An exaggeration, of course, but still, would you believe that the moment that Luis Suarez sunk his teeth into Giorgio Chiellini marked the last time any of us have spoken about a World Cup match featuring Italy? Why has he done that? The Azzurri have 4 stars and are only matched by Germany, only exceeded by Brazil. They've been a powerhouse since the dawn of competitive international football, but like most nations, they have never been strangers to controversy and headlines regarding their nation's football infrastructure. This is the case even when they're winning. The 2006 team won in Berlin in the middle of Calciopoli. Arguably the biggest match manipulation scandal in the history of football was unraveling back in Italy. Juventus captain Fabio Cannavaro lifted the World Cup trophy in triumph, only to return home a few days later to news of his club being relegated for being amongst the ones that got caught. He left the club along with several of his high-profile teammates. Oddly enough, not even Italy's first World Cup win that had domestic football scandals going on in the background. In 1982, Italy beat West Germany to claim star number 3. Paolo Rossi was Italy's star striker, winner of that year's Ballon d'Or, World Cup Golden Ball, and World Cup Golden Boot, with 6 goals in the tournament. He had also been banned, along with many others, in a 1980 match-fixing scandal. His particular ban was for 3 years, but was cut short to 2 years just in time for the 1982 World Cup. Like I said, Italy are not the only country to have unsavory stories around their successes. If you don't believe me, you can check out many of the other videos on countries on this channel. The big issue for Italy, though, is that the negatives far outweigh the positives for them these days. That 2006 World Cup final is the last knockout match that Italy have won in a World Cup. 2010 and 2014, group stage exits. And take a look at how Group D from 2014 finished. I wonder how many people lost money on their predictions here. Probably a lot, myself included. Would you believe that the last person to score a goal in a World Cup for Italy was a 23-year-old Mario Balotelli? In the 12 years since then, Balotelli has played for 12 different clubs and at 35 is thought of as one of the biggest what-ifs in football history. The Italian had his own personal demons, but it's hard not to see the parallels between his trajectory and that of his country. From 2014, the Inquisition was in full force. Reports were written about the youth pipeline having been failing since well before 2006. Studies were published about infrastructure, all while Italy kept getting worse. Come 2018, Italy had failed to qualify for a World Cup for the first time since 1958. Everyone was sacked. Managers, the federation presidents, and they started again. Somehow Roberto Mancini managed to win the 2020 Euros, which led to hope as they beat Austria, Belgium, Spain, and then England at Wembley on penalties. But that hope was dashed after Italy lost to North Macedonia? So they started again. Hired Luciano Spalletti, didn't work. Hired Gennaro Gattuso, didn't work. In hindsight, employing a manager whose temperament was as chaotic as Gattuso's was may have been a mistake.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
Also, this is the same man that had to endure decades of abuse and pranks from his Italian teammates his entire career. Andrea Pirlo dedicated an entire chapter of his autobiography to talking about how they would mess with him. Everything from mocking his grammar, to spraying him with a fire extinguisher while he was asleep, to stealing his phone and texting the AC Milan CEO that he could have his sister if he got a new contract. Perhaps tanking Italy was part of some sort of elaborate revenge plot. We may never know. In all seriousness, Gattuso was never one to back down from a fight. It just seems as though this fight was a step too far. Despite the players being relieved after seeing that they were going to play Bosnia and Herzegovina in the playoffs instead of Wales, they weren't able to get the job done. And honestly, as soon as I saw this video, I knew it was over for them. But you didn't need to see the video to come to that conclusion. Against Norway, in the last game of regular qualification, Italy took a 1-0 lead in the first half. In front of a packed San Siro, home ground advantage, you'd think that the conditions alone would be enough to send them through. 4 months later, playing Bosnia, they led by 1-0 by half-time. On both occasions, a second half from hell saw the Azzurri lose their heads and snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I think there is a lot to be said about the tactical failings of Italy that led to these losses since 2006. We could talk about Suarez siphoning the country's life force. As for the playoff losses, we could talk about moments such as Daniele De Rossi, a CDM, being asked to warm up in the second leg against Sweden in the 2018 qualifiers. Italy were a goal down, and even he was confused an attacker was not going on in his place. We could talk about Alessandro Bastoni's ill-fated red card. But in truth, Italy should not have been in those playoffs to begin with. And then there is the outside commentary that this has spawned. We could talk about how Roberto Baggio, among others, showed disbelief that Italy were not given a World Cup spot after winning the 2020 Euros, even though Euros winners have never been given World Cup spots for winning that competition. We could talk about how Gattuso showed disbelief that more World Cup spots were given to non-UEFA federations, even though the World Cup has been expanded from 32 to 48 teams and UEFA have by far the most with 16, 6 more than CAF with second with 10. But as I said in the intro, it seems as though all of Italy's results on the international front are simply just one of the many symptoms of a really problematic system. I want to go back and expand a little bit more on the youth pipelines and general player environment. We've already noted that they've come under fire and the numbers are alarming. In Italy's most notorious losses during this run, notably the North Macedonia and the Bosnia and Herzegovina losses, they lost in similar but also different ways. In the former, they had the bulk of the control, shots, and possession. In the latter, they showed that in moments, but were ultimately overwhelmed by a team that, as cliche as it sounds, wanted it more. It's easy to argue that these are problems that surface due to, yes, a lack of planning, but also nerves and no strong personalities to lift them through tough times. It's an oversimplification, I know, but these are real factors that are known to be rectified with match time and experience, something that young Italians don't seem to be getting. Quote, "We need to ask ourselves if we really care about getting value out of talent. I think there are still many mothers out there who are churning out talents like those of Baggio, Totti, Del Piero, and Cannavaro did in the past, and we must be in a position to use that talent." That was Luciano Spalletti, former Italian national team coach, and I'm not gonna lie, the wording of the quote, it's a little weird. Unfortunately for those mothers and all of Italy, with the numbers we've already seen in the video, he may have a point. And the notion of Serie A pushing senior Italian players out is a very real one too. As a matter of fact, the Italian government practically pushed them towards doing so. In 2019, a law was passed that effectively granted tax breaks of up to 50% for foreign nationals working in Italy. The intention was to boost economic growth by attracting skilled workers, and as per the website Calciofinanza, Roma and Inter Milan were estimated to have both been saving upwards of 21 and 20 million euros respectively per year, with Juventus and Napoli not far behind. For obvious reasons, amongst several different industries, locals were not happy. The law was abolished in 2024, but I'm sure the damage will be felt for years to come. We already mentioned a few of them in the intro, but there are so many examples of other nations that have famously reinvented themselves and found success, while Italy have directly or indirectly made things worse. Germany sat in a comparable position to Italy in the early 2000s, consecutive group stage exits at Euro 2000 and Euro 2004, so they built a system. Mandatory youth academies were required of all 36 Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2 clubs. Hundreds of regional training centers were established with full-time coaches, designed so that every young player had access to professional coaching infrastructure. Over 1 billion euros was invested in the system by 2014, and the squad that won the 2014 World Cup was almost entirely composed of players who had come through that system. France were in an even more comparable position. They did not even qualify for the 1990 and 1994 World Cups. Clairefontaine, opened in 1988, is one of 16 elite academies for players aged 13 to 15 in all of France. And a decade after it was opened, France won the 1998 World Cup and have only gotten stronger. For Italy, it appears that they are aware of what needs to be done. Since 2024, the Italian Federation has launched a project to revamp the entirety of grassroots Italian football. As per Gravina in his departing letter, this project is, quote, centered on restoring the primacy of technical skill over tactical considerations, strengthening the training of youth sector coaches, end quote. Time will tell if the project bears fruit. And finally, on the subject of stadiums, the Ceferin quote from the start did not come out of nowhere. As per the Italian Federation's 2025 State of Football report, since 2007, 226 new stadiums were built or substantially redeveloped across Europe. Germany built 19, England 13, France 12. The fact that Italy only account for 6 is problematic, even more so, in addition to Serie A CEO Luigi De Ciervo claiming that Italy has the oldest stadiums in Europe with an average age of over 70 per venue. It seems that one of the major reasons that so few get built is that the overwhelming majority of professional football grounds in Italy are publicly or municipally owned. So even if they had the money to improve them, why would they? Imagine refurbishing the apartment you rent for your landlord. Could never be me. And even when they do have the money to move elsewhere, it's not that easy. Juventus were occupants of the Stadio delle Alpi, owned by the city of Turin from 1990 to 2006, but wanted to leave and build their own ground as early as 1992. It took almost 2 decades of fighting stadium designs, municipal bureaucracy, and local politics before they finally moved into the Juventus Stadium in 2011. Inter Milan and AC Milan purchased the San Siro from the city of Milan in 2025 and are planning to demolish the stadiums before moving into a new one on the same site by 2031. But because this is Italy and Serie A, it seems that there's just always some sort of story, right? Coincidentally, within a week of Italy losing on penalties to Bosnia, police raided Milan City Hall in connection with the San Siro redevelopment project. Multiple former officials and consultants were placed under arrest for allegedly rigging the bidding process in favor of the clubs when it was purchased back in 25. If you ask me, that 2031 target isn't looking too strong. Roma spent close to a decade planning a stadium at Torre di Valle before the project collapsed entirely. Fiorentina's American owner, Rocco Commisso, offered to fund a new stadium at his own expense. The city, who owned the stadium, insisted on a publicly funded renovation of their existing stadium instead, citing heritage protections. Several new stadium projects are reportedly in various stages of planning across Italy, but many are not entirely convinced that certain deadlines and promises will be met. So, what do we make of all of this? Can Italy recover? Of course, but it will take time. The wounds of recent times are still deep, but they clearly recognize that something needs to be done. Stadium projects are underway, infrastructure is under reform. I don't doubt that it's doable. Then again, as I'm sure someone said that very same sentence over a decade ago, who's to say that someone won't say it a decade from now? And there we have it. Thanks to all those supporting over on Patreon. You help more than you know. Feel free to join if you haven't done that. That's all for me today. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.